Hello, and welcome back to Blake's New York Kitchen. A long time ago, my wife asked me about making spaghetti sauce. She wanted me to make a spaghetti sauce. And I said, I don't know how to make spaghetti sauce. She said, oh, I'll show you. So she showed me this recipe in its very basic form. I've added a few more things to make it a little bit more appealing. The point is, I asked her, I was like, I'll go to the store and get a jar of sauce. She said, no. I haven't bought a jar of sauce since, all right? I haven't bought a jar in about more than 20 years. So I'm going to show you how to make what I call a basic meat sauce, okay? I'm not going to call it a bolognese because I don't use a lot of the ingredients that the Italian recipe calls for, but I will call it a meat sauce. I think you're going to like it. Now, starting off, I'm going to add some olive oil to my pan. Just enough to cover the bottom. And I got it under medium-high heat. Actually, that's a little bit high. Now it's under medium-high heat. And the first thing I'm going to do is sweat my onions and garlic together. Okay, so here we go. Put the onions in and the garlic. Garlic is so good. So I had 2 large cloves of garlic, but you can use 3 or 4 small ones. And as usual, I'm going to add some salt. A little bit of black pepper. And I'll get my favorite stirring implement, which is this silicone spatula type thing. I'll just give that a quick stir, and I'll cover this up. Now this will give the onions a chance to sweat and to become a little bit translucent. We just want them to be a little bit done. We don't need them all the way done. They certainly don't need to caramelize. With a meat sauce like this, you want to use 80% lean. In other words, there's got to be 20% fat and 80% lean meat in your meat. Now I'm using 2 1-pound packages, so 2 pounds of beef. In this case, sometimes I do 3, sometimes I do 2. Depends on how much I want to make, because here's the thing. Once I make this sauce, I can eat it right away. I can eat it all week long, or I can stick some in the freezer and keep the other half for the week. My tendency is to like to stick some in the freezer because then, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, I'll have another set of meals with this meat sauce. And I tell you, this thing is so simple, you will never want to buy jar sauce again. The other thing that's really good about this is this, similar to, say, a chili, it gets better tasting the longer it sits. So if you have this sit for a week, it tastes better and better each day. Each day it tastes better and better. Give this a quick stir. Well, before these get too done, I'm going to add my meat because I want to brown it. And I love the way Trader Joe's does this because they really grind their meat pretty fine. Just falls apart. To the side. Don't need the paper. And break this up. And we'll put this in here too. Now my mom came up in that generation where, jar sauce was a big deal. Everybody wanted to have jar sauce. And when I was a kid, my mother was never happier than when she got Prego sauce from a jar at the store. And it's not like jar sauce is bad. It's just this is so much better that you don't ever want to go back. Probably turn the heat up a little bit higher. Cover the pan. Now, this is where we get to the first of my secret ingredients. Secret ingredient number one. Anytime I'm cooking with beef, almost every single time when I'm cooking with beef, especially if I'm browning ground beef like this, I add a couple of squirts of Lea & Perrins Worcestershire sauce. And specifically Lea & Perrins. Lea & Perrins Worcestershire sauce is the best tasting one I've tasted. It's kind of the original. And it just adds a flavor to the beef that makes it that much better. So even if it's a little pink here, once it's in a sauce, it's going to cook the rest of the way through. So you don't really need to worry about it being underdone. I just try to get the meat brown. And you want that fluid. You want that fat in there. You don't want it to be dry and crumbly. You want it to be moist and delicious. I'm going to add my basil now, and that's the last of my veg. I had some fresh, so I cut it up to put it in there. But you can use dry spices and fresh spices. It doesn't really matter. I've got in here some bay leaf. I'm going to put a couple of those in there. Try to remember where they are so you can pull them out later. One bay leaf. Two bay leaves. That'll do it. If I wanted to make this spicy, I could add some red pepper at this point. But I'm not big on very spicy stuff. Since I can't eat it anymore, it makes my stomach hurt. The very last of the secret ingredients, like it's a secret, I got some cheap red wine. Now, a couple of recipes ago, you saw I was using cheap white wine, and I explained my reasoning behind that. Same holds true for cheap red wine. It's important that it tastes good. It's also important that it be cheap, because you really don't want to spend a lot of money on something you're going to be cooking in. And I add exactly 1 cup. 1 cup of cheap wine is usually exactly what you need for your recipe. I'm going to add that in with the beef so that it cooks down with the wine in the beef. Give that a proper stir. I also want to cook off some of that fluid from the wine and the Worcestershire sauce. That'll intensify the flavor. The last thing I'm going to add to this pot is crushed tomatoes. Bring that all together and combine it. Let's get this to a simmer. Always got to remember to wash my hands. Once it starts to simmer, you just let it cook. And the longer you let it cook, the better it's going to taste. See those bubbles coming up in the middle? That means it's simmering. So we give it a stir. Garlicky and tomatoey and beefy and all those things that we like. Going to bring the light even lower so that it'll continue to simmer. And about every 5 minutes or so, I will come in and check it, give it a stir. You want to keep stirring it, and you want to let the fluids that are in there simmer off so that it'll condense the flavors. But that's really all there is to it. It's a very simple, basic sauce. You can use this with pasta. I've used it with to make lasagna. I had some sitting in the freezer for about, I don't know, a month and a half. And some people came over and I needed to make something in a hurry, so I whipped up a lasagna. It's also really convenient not to have to pay that exorbitant sum for a little bit of sauce in a jar that's going to last me one meal. I can probably get maybe 5, 6 meals, maybe 8 meals out of what I got right here. And you don't have to eat them all right next to each other. You can make the sauce, have a little bit that night, freeze the rest. 3 weeks later, you take it out, you have a little bit more sauce. But I'm probably going to let this cook for another 20, 30 minutes. And at that point, it's done. You turn it off, you let it cool off. It's one of my favorite things in the world is to make this sauce. It's the simplest of recipes. And again, it's very cost effective and very pleasant to have. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. I absolutely love this sauce. It's one of my favorite things to cook.